AJ, take us into Sunday. We waited. We're
Hmm.
silent, and now the first day, the new creation, Resurrection Sunday. What does that mean for us? What do we need to pull out of that to really enrich our lives?
Yeah, I mean, oddly enough, this is probably the one day we don't have to spend as much time
Sure.
exploring because we, uh, we spend the whole Sunday running around and picking up candy and lawns and and eggs and these chocolate Easter bunnies and whatnot. We do Sunday pretty darn well in terms of our excitement. But it's kind of, in my opinion, become very saccharine. It's become very sweet and low. And I think the reason, it's our Easter has become a little bit like a hollow chocolate bunny. Like it tastes great on the outside, but it's not very thick. And I think the reason it's not very thick is because we haven't truly done the suffering and waiting part well.
Mm.
We skipped over that and just gone to Sunday. And when you do that, it's just a hollow chocolate bunny, you know. Um, but man, when you have walked through and been honest and experienced Friday and Saturday, Sunday is, it is. There's nothing like it. One of my favorite images of the Sunday experience, at least in the New Testament, um, and you actually, in order to understand the image, so there's a woman named Mary who goes to the tomb. She comes out of the tomb, and Jesus is no longer in the tomb. She comes out, and there's a man standing right by the tomb. Now, when you go back to the very beginning of the Bible in Genesis 1 and 2, when God creates the world, the very first image of God is that God plants trees. That's his first image in the garden. God's created the light and all this stuff. But the first thing God is doing in the garden is he's planting a tree, which makes him a gardener. God is a gardener. I mean, that's the very first thing that God does. It's his garden. It's not our garden. So when God says to Adam and Eve, take care of the garden, he's saying, take care of my garden because it's his garden. God is the gardener. The very first image of God in the Bible is as an agriculturalist. He's a gardener. Well, when you go to that story in the resurrection narrative, Mary comes out of the tomb and Jesus was not in there. And she comes out, and John tells us that when she comes out, she sees a man standing by the door. And she looks at him and thinks he's the gardener. Now, usually when we preach this text, we get down on Mary and we're like, well, she clearly didn't see that it was Jesus. When in reality, she actually was spot on. This is the gardener. The gardener is back. The gardener from Genesis 1 and 2 is the gardener who comes out of the tomb. And it's the same person who created the world and planted trees. So the same God that planted trees in the creation story is the one who dies on the tree in the story of the crucifixion. And now the one who created the world and redeems the world has come out in his resurrection body. And that experience of seeing him for who he is in his resurrection body is what Christian hope is all about. And Christian hope, again, is not about getting the perfect marriage. It is not about getting the job we always wanted. It is not about having the kid we always sort of dreamt of. Our ultimate hope is in resurrection life, that death has died, that we have followed Jesus through Friday all the way to glory. And as Paul says, you don't get the glory without the gory. You don't get the glory without Friday. You've got to walk through Friday in order to get Sunday. And if we expect to just get the Sunday experience, but not the Friday and the Saturday, we will be sorely disappointed. We must follow Jesus to the cross in order to follow Jesus out of the tomb. We do not get to pick the parts we want. We embrace the whole story. And so at the end of the day, we embrace Jesus the whole way. We embrace Jesus in our loss, in our waiting, and ultimately in his resurrection.
Yeah, powerful. You said we need resurrection because we can't prove our stories otherwise.
Hmm.
That it's necessary for us. Would you say a little bit more to that?
Well, yeah, Mary. I mean, the story of Mary is a very interesting story throughout the whole gospel account because she, Mary. There's so many interesting things about Mary. For example, Mary is the only person in human history who can worship her child and not be called an idolater. She is the one person in the world who can worship her child, and it's okay. Mary bears to the world, through the body of an ancient woman, bears into the world God, Jesus, the Son incarnate. And the story of Jesus is not only about having our minds changed. If if God simply wanted to shape our minds, Mary would have written a book and not had a baby, but she had a baby. And this little baby would grow up and be the one that we would worship and give our lives to. But when Mary has Jesus, she probably was 16 years old, 15, 16. She was very young. And there is no suggestion whatsoever in the New Testament. There is no suggestion that people actually believed her story. I think it's pretty fair to imagine that for 33 years, she walked around with whispers behind her back. There goes that whore again. Because if I had I'm a university professor. If I had a 16-year-old girl come to my class and say, Dr. Swoboda, I'm so sorry, I'm gonna have to drop out of the course. I'm 16, I'm pregnant, I've never had sex, and I don't know what to do with it. I would say I would have a difficult time believing that woman's story. There is no suggestion that they would have believed her in the ancient world either. And I think she lived her entire life under this cloud of scrutiny. People would have thought of her as a whore, as a woman of ill repute. And there is only one moment in her story where her story is redeemed. And it is the moment Jesus comes out of the tomb and she shows off he shows off his body. I sort of wish I could have seen her face as she's like, look at him. I'm not kidding. I've been telling you the truth for 33 years. You see, because resurrection validated who her entire story. I identify with Mary on so many levels. We live in an increasingly postmodern, post-Christian environment where following Jesus makes you pretty suspect. There's a constant whisper, behind your back as a follower of Jesus. But when you follow Jesus today and there's whispers behind your back, you're okay with it. You're at peace, because there will be a day when he will show up and you'll be able to say, you see, I've been telling you the truth the whole time. And we long for that day when we will see him face to face. But in the meantime, there's a lot of whispers, and I long for the day that those whispers will end. But those whispers are just evidence that God is doing beautiful things in our midst.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you for kind of the insight. I know we talked about a book that is kind of in the rearview mirror for you, maybe for a few years for us. Obviously, we're coming upon it and enjoying it. But I know that you've got a new work that I know you're excited about that's coming out called After Doubt. And I would love for you maybe just to kind of talk about that just for a little bit, because I'm excited for us. At Hill City Church, we're going to be doing kind of in our next group sort of offerings. We're going to have some groups where we're going to gather around this text, because I think doubt is healthy in our faith, and I know that that's an odd combination for some people. But I'd love for you maybe just to give us the drive-by of maybe why you wrote the book, where it came from, and really what you feel its trajectory is for the church.
Yep, love it. I actually just got it myself, so I'm holding up. It's hot, like you can feel it off the presses. So After Doubt, the kind of elevator, big picture, 10,000 feet picture here is, there probably is not one of us who has not had someone in our life, or who ourselves have not walked through either the experience of doubt or what we call deconstruction, which are experiences of beginning to question your own faith structure. So the subtitle of this book is How to Question Your Faith Without Losing It. And the premise of this book is that doubt and deconstruction do not have to be the end of your pursuit of the way of Jesus. And that there are some huge gifts that God gives people who are faithful to him in the midst of those experiences.
Mm.
And so the really big idea here is, for the person who is going through deconstruction, doubt, questioning their faith, don't believe the idea that that is the end of your story, because it's not. And there is hope, and there are 2,000 years of Christians who have walked through exactly what you are walking through and came out the other side with a deeper love for Jesus than they ever had before.
Mm. It's beautiful. Well, I'm excited for it. We're excited for our church to kind of walk through that together. Some of us. I'm grateful, obviously, for our time together today, for you being willing to kind of walk us through Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I'm believing that this year has been an interesting one for many of us. It's been a hard one, and I think this year, Easter, Resurrection, I'm hoping that we can pass through Friday and Saturday with a little bit more solidarity with church history than maybe we have previously. But